Then on Sports Central, we go over our next schedule preview this offseason, and it's going to be for the Utah Utes, one of the big surprise teams of the 2021 college football season. And this is a Utah team that has sky-high expectations going into the 2022 season, and rightfully so. I mean, this is a football team that's returning a lot of excellent players, and the amount of momentum and energy in this program right now heading into 2022 is at a very high level. But that being said, how will this team be in 2022 is what we'll be going over here today. We'll be going over the players this team will be losing, who they'll be returning, and looking at their schedule for the first time this offseason, starting out with some notable games from last season. And this is a team that, I mean, if you looked at how they started out the year, this team really didn't look like a significant football team. But in the end, this team beat Oregon twice, beat them in the regular season against them when they're ranked number 3, 38-7, and beat them in the Pac-12 title game 38-10. So this team, they were the Pac-12 champions last season, and I mean, yeah, just quite a season for Utah. And this was a team that was extremely close to beating Ohio State. I mean, they led the Buckeyes for a good chunk of that game. So obviously it was a tough loss in the end, losing by 3 and what was a shootout there. But Utah down the stretch played very well. They very much improved over the course of the season as well, I would say. Beat USC, of course, on the road 42-26. Beat Arizona State by 2 touchdowns. They're ranked number 18 at the time. And also beat a pretty good Bruin football team 44-24. Yeah, first 7 games, this team was 4-3. So, I mean, the record didn't really look too great in their first 7 games. But in the end, they finished out the season 10-4. Here's your roster preview heading into next season. Cameron Rising, of course, is coming back, your starting quarterback last year. Excellent season for him. 2,500 yards of passing, 20 touchdowns, 5 picks. So his touchdown interception ratio was good, and his completion, I mean, his accuracy was also pretty good last year, 64% overall. So he's an accurate quarterback, and this was only his first year as a starting quarterback. So he kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, many people expected Charlie Brewer, the Baylor transfer, to be the starting quarterback for this team last year, but turns out Cameron Rising was the better quarterback, that's for sure. And he's a dual threat quarterback as well. He had 500 yards of rushing and 6 touchdowns on the ground last season as well. So that's going to be a huge return. Last year was just his first year as a full-time starting quarterback in college football. Tavian Thomas, your top running back's coming back. TJ Pledger as well. So the backfield looks excellent going into next season. You got 2 running backs who combined for over 1,900 yards of offense and 27 touchdowns last season. That is going to be huge going into next year. So keep an eye on both of them. And I mean, they were so successful last year, Thomas and Pledger, and that's definitely something to keep an eye on. I mean, this football team in general, you can see why the expectations are so high. Looking at this roster preview and how this team finished out last season, I mean, it's very reasonable to believe that this team could potentially be in the college football playoff next season and make a deep run at it for sure. So, I mean, this is a team to really be keeping an eye on, and definitely a dark horse, I would say, in college football. Of course, you got Brant Keith coming back, who's an excellent tight end for sure. He put up over 600 yards of offense, 7 touchdowns last season, 600 yards of receiving. So that's going to be huge. He was the top in receiving on this team, and second in receiving, Dalton Kincaid's coming back as well. He put up over 500 yards and 8 touchdowns on the season. And, of course, if you look at the receiving position, your wide receivers, Britton Covey is taking off, so he will not be with this team next season. That's a tough loss. Of course, he's had an impact on this team pretty significantly in the past, but last season he put up 600 yards of total offense, 3 touchdowns as well. But Davon Bailey is coming back, which is going to be a big return. He was your second wideout last season, right around 400 yards of receiving and a touchdown last season as well. So receiving core overall looks pretty good. And, of course, the tight end position is stacked as always for Utah. That was a huge position that they really used to their advantage last season offensively. They do lose 1 offensive lineman, 2 on the defensive line, 1 linebacker, and 1 in the secondary. So you do lose 4 starters defensively, but overall, returning production for a team that was 10-4 last season, kind of a surprise team as well. This team looks fantastic going into next season. So, yeah, great returning production. Overall, totally like what I'm seeing here out of this team returning production-wise. But is this team a potential national contender is the real question here. I mean, this is a football team. I mean, it's a question really worth asking. You got a football team that's returning some excellent football players after a 10-4 season, and a season that they also improved drastically over the course of the year, beating Oregon twice, Pac-12 champions, and almost beat Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. So there's a lot of expectations for this team because of that very reason and how this team did last year, and once again, all the talent on this football team. But transfer portal and recruiting heading into next season, you get a linebacker coming in, Diabate from Florida, which will be a good addition there. And then you got Xavier Carlton, defensive lineman, who's off to Cal. Logan Kendall, tight end, is coming in from Idaho. That'll be a good addition to your tight end unit. You got a receiver, Landon Morris, coming in from Syracuse. In the quarterback position, of course, Charlie Brewer is off to Liberty. He's been all over the place. He was at Baylor and came into Utah for a little while. Didn't really work out, and now he's off to Liberty. But then Peter Costello, of course, who was with Utah. He is in the transfer portal, but we don't know where he's going to quite yet. Recruiting-wise, this team looks okay. Nothing too insane. They're number 38 in the nation. Pac-12-wise, they are in the top third of the conference, which is good news. 4-star recruits, they got 3, and 3-star recruits, they got 14 heading into next season. So overall, looks okay. But that said, let's look at your schedule now going into next season. And this is where things concern me a little bit. And this schedule is tough for Utah going into next season, which honestly could be a good thing. Maybe this is what Utah needs if they want a legit chance at the college football playoff. I mean, if this team goes undefeated, I mean, there's no questioning that this team should be in the college football playoff, if you ask me, because, I mean, if you look at your non-conference schedule, you got a tough game against Florida in the Swamp on the road to start off the season. And then you got San Diego State, of course, who's a pretty good football team. I mean, the Aztecs are, I mean, they're returning quite a bit, and overall, I like where San Diego State is heading going into next season as well. So Utah's got a tough schedule, and this does concern me a bit for the Utes going into next year, is the amount of tough games that are on your schedule. Your conference schedule is also really tough. So, I mean, for Utah, this could be a good thing, but then again, if you take 2 losses, you're pretty much completely eliminated from the college football playoff. So, I mean, if this team wants to get to the college football playoff, their schedule can help them do so because of how tough it is, but you got to win those tough games, that is for sure. But looking at your first half, of course, you got Florida on the road, Southern Utah home, San Diego State at home, then Arizona State on the road, Oregon State at home, then UCLA on the road. You got USC at home, Washington State on the road to finish out your October. And then in November, you got Arizona and Stanford at home, and then Oregon and Colorado on the road to finish out the season. Looking at some projections here for the first half of the schedule, I'm going to go with Florida and Arizona State. I'm going to favor the Gators and the Sun Devils in both of those games just because they're on the road, and both teams I'm expecting to be fairly decent football teams, especially Arizona State. That is a team that I think is actually a pretty decent dark horse going into next season. Arizona State, I think, is a team that a lot of people are sleeping on. Potentially, they could be a big contender in the conference next season. So I'm going to favor, and these aren't official predictions quite yet. I'll be predicting Utah's schedule game by game once we get to late spring and into early summer. But for right now, this is just my projection for this team. But Florida on the road, that's going to be I don't know what to predict yet. We're still several months out from the season, but as of right now, I'm gonna favor the Gators in that game. Southern Utah, easy win. I'm gonna favor the Utes against San Diego State, but that's gonna be a close one there. Arizona State once again favoring the Sun Devils there. Oregon State, easy win. Not expecting too much out of the Beavers. And UCLA could be a tough one as well, being on the road, and UCLA could be a decent football team as well, but I'm gonna favor the Utes in that game as well. Second half of the schedule, some very intriguing games as well. USC, of course, is a team that's pretty unpredictable. They were 4-8 last year, but they got some great additions going into next season. Travis Dye, Caleb Williams, and, of course, Lincoln Riley. So potentially that could really help that team, and we'll see how they do. But I'm going to still favor the Utes against USC and Washington State as well on the road. Easy wins over Arizona and Stanford, and then Oregon and Colorado on the road. I'm going to favor Utah against Oregon on the road just because of how dominant the Utes were against Oregon last season, but then again, it is a different year, so we could see it be different. But Oregon's also a very interesting football team. Bo Nix coming in from Auburn. They're pretty unpredictable as well. And honestly, the Pac-12 is so unpredictable as a conference, definitely the most unpredictable conference in the Power 5 by far. I mean, you got several teams that could definitely be national contenders. I'd say 4 or 5 teams could be national contenders in that conference next season. And, I mean, we'll see what happens, but yeah, that Oregon-Utah game is going to be crucial there on the 19th, and I do expect I'm going to go with Utah to be favored right now, but once again, we're still a long ways out. And then Colorado to finish out the season, I'm also going to favor the Utes in that game. So record prediction is going to be 9-3 to 12-0. So I'm going to keep it at a wide range of possible records. I do think this team is definitely at least an 8 or 9 win team next season. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised a single bit to see this team go 10-2 or 11-1. And I'm not going to rule out a 12-0, which 12-0 is going to be brutal. And this team very much deserves a college football playoff spot if they do go undefeated, because, I mean, it is a tough schedule. But definitely a lot of interesting factors at play here for this Utah football team. But that's going to wrap it up for today. Let me know your thoughts and comments below on this football team, and I appreciate you guys all watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.